Settle in, because tonight I am going to tell you about a will. Not just any will. A will that was rewritten and rewritten again and rewritten a third time by one of the richest, most ruthless men who ever lived, for one reason and one reason only. A young man he could not bear to lose. If you think you know Cecil Rhodes, the empire, the diamonds, the statues people keep arguing about pulling down, you know the marble version. Cold, public, safe. Tonight, we are going somewhere he never let the newspapers go, into a small house on a dusty street in Kimberley, South Africa, where a 29-year-old diamond magnate shared a bed with his private secretary for 4 years, made him the sole heir to everything he owned, and then, when that young man was dying, refused to answer a single telegram, not one from an empire worth millions, so that he would not have to leave his side. That is not the Cecil Rhodes on the plinth. That is not the Cecil Rhodes in the textbook. But it is, as far as the historical record allows us to say anything about a dead man's heart, the truest one. So dim the lights, let your shoulders drop. Because before Rhodes was a name carved into a scholarship, a country, and a very great deal of controversy, he was just a sickly, awkward young man from an English vicarage who went to Africa to save his lungs, and found instead someone worth living for. Before we go any further, if you're new here, welcome to the Sleeping Archaeologist. We dig up the histories nobody teaches you in school, the real love stories, the real scandals, the ones smoothed out of the official record, and we tell them slowly, gently, so you can drift off to something a little more interesting than counting sheep. Hit subscribe if you'd like more of this, and if you'd like to read along or share these stories with a friend, we've put together a free PDF storybook of some of our favourite episodes. The link is in the description below. Now, lights down, get comfortable, let's begin properly. 1870. Picture, if you will, a boy of 17 stepping off a boat in Durban, and picture him unimpressively. He is not the square-jawed empire builder of the postcards. He is tall, yes, but gangly, pale, asthmatic, with a weak heart that English doctors had more or less written off. His own family sent him to the colonies the way you might send a wilting houseplant out to get some sun, not expecting much to come of it. He had been a clergyman's son, a middling student, more comfortable indoors with a book than out on a cricket pitch, and the general assumption in Bishop Stortford was that young Cecil would either die quietly of consumption or come home in a year, having failed to make anything of himself in the colonies, as so many second sons before him had. Nobody in that vicarage could possibly have guessed that within 30 years this boy would control 90% of the world's diamond production, found a country that would be named after him, and leave behind a will so strange, so specific, so soaked in longing for one particular young man that historians would still be arguing about what it meant more than a century later. But that is getting ahead of ourselves. In 1871, Rhodes made his way to the diamond fields of Kimberley, a boomtown so raw and chaotic it barely deserved the name of town. Imagine a landscape gouged into a single enormous crater, thousands of men working claims the size of a dining table, dust so thick you could taste copper in the back of your throat, the constant clank of buckets on wire ropes hauling ore up from holes that grew deeper every month. It smelled of sweat, cordite, and unwashed canvas tents. At night the diggers drank cheap brandy and told each other lies about the diamonds they were about to find. It was not a place built for a boy who needed rest and clean air, and yet it was here, in this brutal open wound in the earth, that Cecil Rhodes discovered the one thing he was genuinely, frighteningly good at: consolidation. While other men fought over individual claims the size of a tablecloth, Rhodes began quietly buying up his neighbours' plots, one by one, patiently, relentlessly, the way a man plays a very long game of chess against opponents who don't yet know they're playing. By his mid-20s he was wealthy. By his late 20s he was well on his way to being one of the richest men in the world, having begun the long, ruthless process of amalgamating every diamond claim in Kimberley into a single company, the company that would eventually become De Beers. He split his time between Kimberley and Oxford, of all places, dragging out an undergraduate degree over several years, because he refused to let ill health or a diamond empire stop him from getting the credentials he felt he needed. He was, by every account from the period, a strange combination, brilliant with numbers and geology and the mechanics of monopoly, and almost hopeless with people, awkward in company, uninterested in women in the way Victorian gentlemen of his class were expected to be interested in women, prone to sudden intense attachments to younger men who caught his attention, and then, just as suddenly, distant again. And then, in 1882, one particular young man walked into his office, and everything about Cecil Rhodes's emotional life changed. His name was Neville Pickering. He was 26 years old, several years Rhodes's junior, and by the description of everyone who met him, he was exactly what Rhodes was not. Warm, sociable, easy in a room. The kind of young man other men liked instantly and without effort. Pickering had come out to South Africa a few years earlier and worked his way into the diamond business, and when Rhodes needed a private secretary for the De Beers Mining Company, Pickering got the job. What happened next was not, by the standards of the time, entirely unusual on the surface. Victorian men formed close, intense friendships with one another constantly. What we might now read as romantic, they called simply brotherly affection, and society mostly looked the other way as long as nobody was indiscreet about it. But even against that backdrop, what developed between Rhodes and Pickering struck the people around them as something more. Graham Bower, a colonial official who knew them both, later described their bond in a phrase that has survived into every serious biography of Rhodes since: an absolutely lover-like friendship. Think about the weight of that phrase for a moment. Bower did not say close friendship. He did not say devoted companionship. He reached specifically, deliberately, for the word lover. And this was a man writing in an era when such a word, applied to two men, was not tossed around lightly. It was a word chosen because no gentler one would do justice to what he had witnessed. The two men moved in together, not down the corridor from one another, not in neighbouring houses, together in a small, modest cottage in Kimberley, sharing quarters the way you would expect only the closest of companions, or something more, to share them. You are there now if you let yourself imagine it, a single-storey house with a corrugated iron roof that pinged and ticked in the African heat, a veranda where the two men would sit in the evenings as the dust settled and the diggings fell quiet, the smell of paraffin lamps and strong tea. Two men who had built, in the middle of one of the most brutal boomtowns on earth, something that looked remarkably like a home. Within months, Rhodes did something that tells you everything about how deeply this relationship had rooted itself in him. He rewrote his will. Not a minor amendment, not a small legacy tucked into a longer document. He made Neville Pickering his sole heir. Every claim, every share, every scrap of the fortune he had spent a decade clawing together out of the Kimberley dust was to go, in its entirety, to this one young man. Rhodes had brothers. He had a father, a mother, a wide network of family back in England who might reasonably have expected some share of a fortune this size. He left them out entirely. There was only one name on that will, and it was Pickering's. For 4 years, the two men were, by every surviving account, inseparable. While Rhodes built the mechanics of what would become one of the largest business monopolies in history, squeezing out rival claim holders, negotiating with the banking house of Rothschild, absorbing competitor after competitor into the corporate structure that would eventually control the entire world's diamond output, Pickering managed his correspondence, ran his household, and by all appearances gave the increasingly wealthy, increasingly powerful Rhodes the one thing his money could never buy him on its own: somewhere to come home to. You have to understand what Rhodes was becoming during these years, because the contrast makes the tenderness of the Pickering relationship almost startling. This was a man who, in his business dealings, showed no mercy whatsoever, a man who once said, without apparent irony, that if he could, he would annex the planets, that he was so utterly convinced of the superiority of the English race that expanding its rule across the globe was to him a moral duty rather than an act of conquest. He crushed smaller diamond operators without a flicker of hesitation. He was already, in these Kimberley years, laying the groundwork for the kind of colonial ambition that would eventually see a country carved out of southern Africa, and named, with a lack of modesty history has never quite forgiven him for, Rhodesia after himself. And yet, in that small cottage with the man he loved, colleagues described something almost unrecognizable as belonging to the same person. Patience, softness, a willingness to set aside the ledgers and the ambition and simply be present with another human being. It is one of the great, strange contradictions historians still wrestle with, how the same hands that dismantled entire African chiefdoms in service of empire could, in private, be gentle with one particular person in a way they were gentle with almost nothing else in the world. Picture an evening in 1884. The Kimberley heat has finally broken with the sunset, and out on the veranda the two men sit with tin cups of tea gone lukewarm in the dark. Somewhere off in the diggings a dog is barking at nothing in particular. Rhodes, normally so guarded, so calculating, so incapable of small talk that colleagues found him almost rude in company, is laughing at something Pickering has said, really laughing, the kind of unguarded laugh that the biographies tell us was rare enough to be remarked upon by anyone who witnessed it. This is a man who, within the decade, will control a diamond monopoly worth an almost unthinkable fortune and effectively govern a landmass larger than Western Europe. And in this moment, none of that matters half as much as the fact that the man across from him has just made him laugh. But 1884 was also the year everything began to unravel, though neither man could have known it yet. Pickering had always ridden. It was one of the few pleasures he allowed himself outside of work. One of the few times, colleagues noted, that Rhodes did not insist on his company. Pickering enjoyed the solitude of a horse and open country, the wind, the brief illusion of freedom from the relentless machinery of the diamond business. It was, in the way of these things, an entirely ordinary pastime. Right up until the afternoon it wasn't. The details that survive are frustratingly sparse, as details from this period so often are. A riding accident, a fall, injuries serious enough that Pickering was carried back into Kimberley rather than walking in under his own power. We do not know precisely what broke or how badly, only that it was bad enough that the doctors who examined him did not offer much hope, and bad enough that what followed was not a swift recovery, but a long, grinding 6-week decline. And here is where the story stops being simply a Victorian romance and becomes something closer to a testament. Cecil Rhodes, at this point in his life, was already one of the most consequential businessmen on the entire African continent. He had negotiations running with London bankers. He had rival mining operations to outmaneuver. He had, in short, every possible reason, commercial, political, personal ambition, to keep working, keep travelling, keep his hand on the machinery of the empire he was building. Instead, he stopped, completely. He moved into Pickering's sick room and did not leave it. For 6 weeks, Cecil Rhodes nursed Neville Pickering with his own hands, not through servants, not through hired nurses, though there would certainly have been the money and the means to arrange for the very best medical attention Kimberley could offer. He did it himself, changing dressings, sitting through fevered nights, spooning what little food Pickering could manage past cracked lips, the whole grim, unglamorous, exhausting labour of nursing a dying man that nobody, least of all a colonial magnate with an empire to run, was expected to perform personally. And the telegrams kept arriving. This is the detail that ought to stop you cold, because it tells you more about the man than 100 pages of business history ever could. Rhodes's diamond and mining interests did not pause simply because their owner had disappeared into a sick room. Urgent business communications piled up, deals awaiting his signature, negotiations awaiting his input, the ordinary, relentless churn of an empire that ran, quite literally, on his decisions. And Rhodes, by every account that survives, simply refused to answer them. Not delayed, refused. Colleagues who tried to press him on urgent commercial matters were turned away from the sickroom door. The most acquisitive man in southern Africa, a man who would go on to say that expanding British territory was worth almost any price, decided, in the one moment it actually mattered, that there was no business on earth worth leaving that room for. You are there again, if you let yourself be. The small house feels different now. The veranda where the laughter used to carry into the evening is silent. Inside, the shutters are half drawn against the worst of the daytime heat, and the air smells of carbolic soap and the particular staleness of a sick room that has not been aired properly in days. Rhodes sits at the bedside in shirt sleeves, his usually immaculate collar long since abandoned, dark circles carved under his eyes from too many nights without proper sleep. Outside, a rider arrives with yet another telegram from the mining office. Urgent, they always say urgent, and is told, again, that Mr. Rhodes is not to be disturbed. Neville Pickering died on the 6th of October, 1884. He died, as near as the historical record allows us to say with any confidence, in Cecil Rhodes's arms. Sit with that for a moment, because I think we rush past sentences like that too quickly. This was not a death witnessed from across a room, not a death relayed secondhand by a doctor emerging to deliver the news. This was Rhodes, physically holding the man he loved at the exact moment he stopped breathing. What happened afterward tells you just as much as what came before. Rhodes did not simply grieve quietly and move on with the stoic reserve so prized by Victorian gentlemen. Colleagues described him as devastated in a way that frightened people who thought they knew him. A man who had built an empire on cold calculation, reduced for a period to something raw and unrecognizable. He kept Pickering's room, by some accounts, essentially untouched. He spoke of him for years afterward in terms that went well beyond the ordinary language of remembering a valued colleague. And crucially, because this is, after all, a story about a will, Rhodes never fully filled the space that Pickering's death left in his personal life, at least not in the same way. He would go on, in the years that followed, to form other close and controversial attachments to younger men, most notably to Leander Starr Jameson, the physician and administrator whose name would later become notorious across the British Empire for the disastrous Jameson Raid, an unauthorized invasion of Boer territory that Rhodes himself was forced to resign over. Jameson would become, in time, a trustee of Rhodes's estate and one of the principal beneficiaries of his eventual will, a will that, tellingly, Rhodes rewrote and rewrote again across his lifetime, each version reflecting whichever younger man currently held the closest place in his affections. It became something of a private joke among Rhodes's circle, this habit of constantly revising his testament around his personal attachments, though nobody joked about it to his face, and here is where the historians start arguing, and where I think it's only fair to tell you honestly that they have never entirely stopped. Some biographers, Robert Rotberg and Brian Roberts among the most prominent, have looked at this evidence and concluded, in Rotberg's words, that Rhodes's homosexuality is indisputable on the basis of the available evidence. Others have pushed back hard against that reading. Some, like the earlier biographers John Gilbert Lockhart and C.M. Woodhouse, denied it outright, preferring to read these relationships as simply the intense, non-physical brotherly bonds so common among Victorian men of a certain class. Stuart Cloete took a different tack altogether, arguing that Rhodes was essentially asexual, that his energies were so thoroughly consumed by ambition and empire that romantic or physical attachment to anyone of any gender simply wasn't part of his makeup. And more recent, more careful scholars like Richard Brown have landed somewhere in the honest middle, that the surviving evidence strongly suggests something more than friendship, but that a Victorian gentleman's diary and a colonial official's letter are never going to give us the kind of certainty a modern biographer might wish for. It is inferred, Brown writes, but not proven. I want to be honest with you about why that matters, rather than pretending the debate doesn't exist. We are dealing with a man who lived in an era when any explicit acknowledgement of a same-sex relationship could end a career, a reputation, even a life. Oscar Wilde, tried and imprisoned for exactly this kind of indecency, was Rhodes's contemporary almost to the year. Nobody in 1880s Kimberley was going to write, "My employer is in love with his secretary," in a letter that might survive to be read by future generations. What we have instead is the language people reached for around the edges of what they weren't permitted to say outright, an absolutely lover-like friendship, a will rewritten for a companion instead of a family member, a man who abandoned an empire's business to nurse a dying friend with his own hands, and held him as he died. You're allowed to draw your own conclusions from that. Historians certainly have. What isn't in dispute, whatever conclusion you land on, is the shape of the grief and the shape of the will. Whatever the precise nature of what existed between Cecil Rhodes and Neville Pickering, it was, by any Victorian standard, extraordinary, extraordinary enough to rewrite a fortune around, extraordinary enough to abandon a Diamond Empire's business for 6 unbroken weeks, extraordinary enough that a hardened colonial official, writing decades before anyone thought a television drama might one day treat Rhodes's life as openly gay, still reached instinctively for the word lover. The rest of Rhodes's life reads, by comparison, almost like an anticlimax. Though history, of course, does not agree, it is the part everyone remembers, the part carved onto plinths and printed in textbooks. He went on to found the British South Africa Company, to push British control deep into Central Africa, to have an entire territory, what would become Rhodesia, and later Zimbabwe and Zambia, named for him at the absolute height of his self-regard. He served as Prime Minister of the Cape Colony. He built one of the largest personal fortunes on Earth, and in his final will, the last of many rewrites, the version that actually took effect after his death in 1902, he left the bulk of his fortune not to a single companion this time, but to the creation of the Rhodes Scholarship, an academic award that still, more than a century later, sends young students to study at Oxford, and that still, awkwardly for the university, bears his name. That name has not aged quietly. In 2015, students at the University of Cape Town began a protest movement, Rhodes Must Fall, demanding the removal of a statue of Rhodes from their campus, a protest that succeeded within weeks and then spread, remarkably, all the way to Oxford, where campaigners called for the removal of a Rhodes statue outside Oriel College itself. The Oxford statue, in the end, was not removed. The college cited legal and financial complications, but a plaque was added beneath it in recent years, quietly acknowledging the violence and exploitation that funded the fortune it commemorates. The debate reignited again in 2020, amid the global reckoning that followed George Floyd's murder, with more than 1,000 protesters gathering outside Oriel College demanding once more that the statue come down. It is a strange kind of afterlife for a man who spent the final quiet years of his private life still occasionally revising a will around whichever companion mattered most to him at the time. The empire he built is remembered, argued over, protested against and slowly dismantled, brick by symbolic brick more than 100 years after his death. But the small cottage in Kimberley, the 6 weeks at a dying man's bedside, the telegrams left unanswered, those details survive only in the margins, in biographers' footnotes, in a single carefully chosen phrase from a colonial official who knew exactly what he was describing when he called it lover-like. So, what do we actually know at the end of all this? We know that a 17-year-old boy arrived in Africa, expected to die quietly, and instead built one of the largest fortunes the world had ever seen. We know that somewhere in the middle of that ruthless ascent, he met a young man named Neville Pickering, and that whatever existed between them was, in the words of someone who watched it happen, unmistakably like love. We know he rewrote his will for him. We know he nursed him with his own hands for 6 weeks and refused to leave his side for anything, not urgent business, not the empire he was already beginning to build. We know Pickering died in his arms, and we know that Rhodes, for the rest of his complicated, contradictory, controversial life, kept quietly rewriting his will around the people he loved, as though he never quite stopped trying to make sure that whoever mattered most would be provided for one final time when he could no longer say so himself. History rarely hands us certainty about anyone's heart, least of all a man as guarded and as strategically silent as Cecil Rhodes. But it hands us this: a will, rewritten, a sick room, never left, and a phrase, lover-like, that has outlived every statue built in his honour and every statue since torn down. Make of that what you will. The historians certainly have, and I suspect they always will. And on that note, dust settling over the Kimberley diggings, a small house gone quiet, a will folded away in a drawer somewhere with one name written where a whole family might once have expected several. I will leave you to drift off. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. If you enjoyed this story, please do subscribe and consider leaving the video on to help you sleep through until morning. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next story.
Thank you for having me. What a wonderful channel. Our next story is the genius who tricked a king to build a mathematical miracle in stone. Hope you like it. Let's talk about genius. We have this modern, almost romantic idea of what it is. A flash of lightning. A sudden, divine insight. The lone, tortured artist in a dusty attic, fueled by cheap wine and angst, suddenly slapping their forehead and producing a masterpiece out of thin air. We love this story. It's clean, it's simple, and it makes genius feel like magic. It's also the greatest public relations campaign ever run for what is, in reality, a soul-crushing, bureaucratic, and mind-numbingly tedious process. The truth is, most world-changing creations weren't born in a flash of inspiration. They were argued over in committee meetings. They were subject to budget cuts, stakeholder feedback, and endless, maddening revisions from people who thought they knew better. They were the result of tedious paperwork, political maneuvering, and a kind of sheer, bloody-minded persistence that would make a mountain weep. The image of the lone genius is a beautiful story we tell ourselves to hide the messy, deeply human, and frankly, often infuriating reality of actually getting something done. The idea of the lone genius creating a masterpiece in a flash of inspiration is a beautiful lie. Tonight, you are that genius. But you are no tortured artist in an attic. You are Sir Christopher Wren. It's the late 17th century. The city of London is a sprawling, smoldering ruin around you, and your official title is Surveyor of the King's Works. But that's just a job title on your very important, very dusty business card. In reality, you are one of the most brilliant scientific minds in Europe. You're a founding member of the Royal Society, an astronomer who charted the heavens, a physicist who understood the laws of motion, a mathematician who could see the world in numbers, and a man who once, for the sake of science, injected wine into a dog's bloodstream just to see what would happen. And you have just been handed the most daunting, politically charged, and creatively suffocating group project in the history of England, rebuilding St. Paul's Cathedral. And the proof of your particular brand of genius isn't just in the grand building that would eventually stand here. It's in a single, almost magical feature hidden high within its dome, an architectural whisper that travels across 100 feet of empty space. This feature, the Whispering Gallery, is the ultimate receipt. It's the undeniable physical proof that you weren't just stacking bricks in a pretty shape. You were conducting a symphony in stone and air. You were manipulating the invisible laws of physics with the same confidence that a baker needs dough. It's the world's first, and perhaps greatest, analog surround sound system, built not with wires and speakers, but with geometry, limestone, and an intellect so profound it could literally bend the path of a human voice. The discovery that this wasn't an accident, but a deliberate feature of an impossibly complex design, forced everyone to reevaluate not just this one building, but the mind of the man who conceived it. This creation, finished in the early 18th century in the heart of London, reveals something extraordinary about the intersection of science, art, and sheer, bloody-minded persistence. As we settle in tonight, we're going to uncover not just what one man built, but what it tells us about the surprisingly relatable lives of people who lived in a city rising from the ashes. Now dim the lights, and prepare to discover why this story will change how you think about genius itself. Your story, or at least this chapter of it, begins with the end of a world. The year is 1666, and London is burning. For 4 days in early September, a fire, started in a small bakery on a street ironically named Pudding Lane, has been devouring the medieval city. It consumes the tightly packed, timber-framed houses like kindling. It melts the bells in the church towers until they pour down in molten streams. The lead roof of the old St. Paul's Cathedral, a colossal Gothic giant that had stood for centuries, liquefies and runs down the streets in a gleaming, toxic river. You are there to witness it. You are 43 years old, a celebrated professor of astronomy at Oxford, a man more comfortable with a telescope than a T-square. Architecture, for you, has been a passionate and very clever hobby, but a hobby nonetheless. But as you stand there, watching the heart of your city turn to ash and smoke, you feel not just horror, but a flicker of something else. An opportunity. A terrible, magnificent opportunity. The London you knew, a cramped, plague-ridden labyrinth of narrow alleys and leaning buildings, is being erased. Wiped clean. For an architect, for a planner, for a man who believes in logic, order, and the elegant beauty of geometry, this is the ultimate blank slate. The air is thick with the smell of scorched timber and despair, but beneath it, you can almost smell the future. A new London, a better London, a city of wide boulevards, rational grids, and magnificent stone buildings. A city worthy of a modern age, and at its heart, a new cathedral. Before the last embers have even cooled, you are at your drawing board. You are not alone, of course. Half a dozen other architects and thinkers are doing the same, scrambling to present their vision for a new city to the King, Charles II. Your plan is the most ambitious. It's a vision of London reborn, inspired by the grand geometric layouts of Paris and Rome. Wide, straight avenues radiating from grand plazas. It's logical, it's clean, it's beautiful, and it's completely and utterly doomed. Rebuilding a city isn't like solving a mathematical equation. It involves people, and people have property deeds, ancient land rights, and a profound reluctance to give up their little patch of earth, even if it is currently a pile of smoking rubble, for the sake of some grand, abstract design. Your beautiful, logical plan is quietly shelved. It's your first, but certainly not your last, brutal lesson in the difference between the purity of an idea and the messy reality of implementing it. But the cathedral is another matter. That is a single project, a royal commission. The old one is a ruin, its mighty stone columns exploded by the heat, its structure irrevocably broken. A new one must be built. The King, a man who appreciates science and grandeur in equal measure, appoints you as one of the commissioners for the rebuilding. Soon you are the principal architect. The job is yours. You, Christopher Wren, the astronomer who once drew detailed pictures of the moon, are now tasked with building the most important church in the entire kingdom. The pressure is immense. The expectations are astronomical. And the committee you have to answer to will, you'll soon discover, make charting the course of a comet seem like a simple afternoon's diversion. The first challenge isn't stone or wood, it's ghosts. You must first clear the wreckage of the old cathedral. This is no simple demolition job. It is a gargantuan task. The remaining walls are hundreds of years old and several feet thick. The central tower, though damaged, still looms over the site like a stubborn old man refusing to leave. Your first attempts to bring it down with simple brute force and scaffolding fail. The structure is too strong, too ancient. Your workers, good, honest men who understand traditional methods, are stumped. This is where you cease to be just the architect and become the scientist. You turn to a new and rather controversial technology, gunpowder. You are a man of physics, and you understand the principles of controlled demolition. You calculate the precise amount of powder needed, drill holes in the strategic piers, and with a carefully managed explosion, bring a massive section of the old wall down in a neat pile of rubble. It's a brilliant success, efficient, scientific. It's also terrifying to the general public. Londoners, already on edge from the fire and a recent plague, hear the boom and see the cloud of dust and assume the world is ending again. Rumors fly. You are accused of being reckless. Your own foreman, convinced he can do it better, uses far too much powder on the next section, sending a chunk of stone flying into a nearby house and killing a man. The incident is a disaster for morale and public relations. Gunpowder is banned from the site. You are forced to go back to the old ways, using a massive, custom-built battering ram, a slow, clumsy, medieval solution that takes months. It's a frustrating, humbling lesson. Your brilliant scientific solution was perfect on paper, but in the real world, it was undone by human error and public fear. You are learning that building a cathedral isn't just about math. It's about managing people. And then there is the design itself. The committee, a formidable body of clergy and royal officials, knows what it wants. Or rather, it knows what it doesn't want. It doesn't want anything that smells too much of popery, of Catholicism. St. Peter's Basilica in Rome is the great architectural rival, the benchmark. You are to build something that rivals its scale and grandeur, but without looking too Italian. It's a contradictory and maddening brief. Build me a lion, they are saying, but please, make sure it looks like a particularly impressive sheep. You spend years on designs. Your first attempt, known as the first model, is modest. It's a simple, practical design with a small dome. It gets rejected, not grand enough. So you go back to your drawing board. You let your true vision flow. You are a man in love with classical geometry, with the clean, perfect forms of circles and squares. You design a church based on a Greek cross with 4 equal arms and a vast, magnificent central dome that would dominate the space. It's breathtakingly modern, a departure from the long, narrow naves of traditional English cathedrals. To help the committee visualize it, you commission a massive, intricate wooden model, the Great Model. It's a masterpiece in itself, 20 feet long and costing a fortune, a 17th century equivalent of a full CGI virtual reality walkthrough. You present the Great Model to the committee with pride. This is your soul rendered in wood and plaster. It is your argument for a new kind of sacred architecture, one based on light, space, and mathematical harmony. And the clergy, they absolutely hate it. They are horrified. It doesn't look like a proper English church. Where is the long nave for processions? It looks too much like something you'd find in Rome. It is too radical, too scientific, too you. The rejection is a crushing blow. You have poured your heart and intellect into this design, and it has been dismissed out of hand by men whose vision is stuck in the past. It's said you were so wounded by the rejection that you could barely look at the Great Model afterwards. It still exists today, a silent, beautiful monument to a brilliant idea that was simply too far ahead of its time. You had the king's approval for a building you couldn't stand to build. The contract was signed. The money was allocated. So what do you do when your greatest opportunity is also your creative prison? You are backed into a corner. The committee demands a more traditional, longitudinal plan. The king is getting impatient. The pressure is on to just start building something. So you compromise. You produce a new design, the one that becomes known as the Warrant design. It's a hybrid, a Frankenstein's monster of a plan. It has the long nave the clergy wanted, but you manage to keep a large dome. It's a pastiche of different styles, and you know in your heart that it's a mess. It's architecture by committee, a camel designed by people who set out to build a horse. The king, eager to get things moving, approves it. The royal warrant is issued. This is now the official, legally binding plan for St. Paul's Cathedral. And you despise it. Here you are, the greatest scientific mind of your age, legally bound to build a compromise you find aesthetically offensive. For many, this would be the end of the story. You'd swallow your pride, cash the checks, and build the mediocre building the committee wants. But you are not many people. You are Christopher Wren, and you are about to engage in one of the most brilliant acts of bureaucratic subterfuge in architectural history. You look at the royal warrant, the very document that seems to be your prison, and you find a loophole. Tucked away in the text is a small, seemingly innocent clause, granting you the power to make variations, rather ornamental than essential, as from time to time he should see proper. Ornamental changes. That's your key. Your get-out-of-jail-free card. You realize that the committee, in its haste, has given you an opening. You can, and you will, interpret the word ornamental very, very broadly. You will build their traditional floor plan, yes. You will give them their long nave. But the dome, the superstructure, the entire visual character of the building, that, you decide, falls under the category of ornamentation. It's an audacious, risky, and deeply cynical move. You are essentially planning to trick the king and the most powerful men in England. You will build the cathedral you truly want, right under their noses, by pretending it's the one they approved. You start construction based on the warrant design, but as the walls go up, you begin to make your variations. The changes are subtle at first, small adjustments to proportions and placements. But as the years go by, the building rising from the ground begins to look less and less like the clumsy warrant design, and more like the grand, harmonious vision you had all along. Your daily life now becomes a complex dance of art, science, and politics. You are not just an architect. You are a project manager on a scale that is almost unimaginable today. You are on site constantly, a familiar, black-clad figure striding through the chaos. Your office is a small wooden hut amidst the dust and noise. You oversee a workforce that numbers in hundreds, sometimes thousands. Masons from all over the country, carpenters, blacksmiths, carvers, plasterers, laborers. You are the conductor of this massive, chaotic orchestra. Imagine your mornings. You wake before dawn in your house on Scotland Yard. The air in London is thick with the smell of coal smoke and the damp chill from the river. You eat a quick breakfast, and then you are off to the site. The journey itself is a reminder of the task at hand, passing through a city still very much a work in progress, a patchwork of new brick buildings and rubble-strewn lots. As you approach Ludgate Hill, the highest point in the city, the skeleton of your creation comes into view, growing year by year. It is a forest of wooden scaffolding, a mountain of white Portland stone, crawling with men who look like ants from a distance. The sound reaches you before you even arrive, a constant, dull roar of hammering, chipping, shouting, and a creak of primitive wooden cranes lifting massive blocks of stone into the air. You spend your days clambering over the scaffolding, your boots covered in stone dust. You check the work of the masons, ensuring every stone is perfectly dressed, every joint perfectly fitted. You carry a sketchbook, constantly drawing, refining details on the fly. You resolve disputes between foremen. You inspect the quality of the timber, the mix of the mortar, the sharpness of the tools. You are a micromanager, but you have to be. The standards you are setting are unprecedented. You are not just building. You are inventing new techniques as you go. Your afternoons are for administration. The paperwork is endless. You approve payroll for hundreds of workers. You negotiate contracts for shiploads of Portland stone, a beautiful, pale limestone that has to be quarried on the coast and brought up the Thames by barge. Every single block is accounted for. You review the accounts, which are funded by a special tax on coal coming into London. This makes the cathedral a highly political project. Every citizen is paying for it, and they want to see results. You spend hours in meetings with the ever-present committee, presenting progress reports, justifying expenses, and most importantly, distracting them with minor details about ornamental carvings while you quietly revolutionize the building's entire structure. It is exhausting, relentless work. And the structure you designed on paper seemed impossible. A massive stone dome supported by mathematics. And now, you had to convince a generation of masons who built with rule of thumb that your numbers wouldn't come crashing down on their heads. This dome is the heart of your secret vision, the part of the building that will make it truly great. But it also presents a colossal engineering problem. A single stone dome, large enough to be seen across the city, would be too heavy for the walls to support. A single dome, proportioned to look beautiful from the inside, would look squat and unimpressive from the outside. It's an architectural paradox. Your solution is so ingenious that it remains hidden from the average visitor to this day. You don't build one dome. You build three. Three distinct domes, nested inside each other like a set of Russian dolls. First, there is the shallow inner dome, the one visitors see when they look up from the cathedral floor. It's an architectural illusion, designed for aesthetic harmony from below, made of brick and plaster and covered in beautiful paintings. It's relatively light. Then, on the outside, there is the great lead-covered outer dome. This is the iconic shape you see on the London skyline. It's a thin, lightweight shell, essentially a roof, supported by a massive timber frame. It's also an illusion. The real genius, the real structural muscle, is the third dome, hidden between the other two. It's not a dome at all, but a massive, incredibly strong brick cone, like a giant dunce cap. This cone, invisible to everyone, is what does all the work. It rises up from the base, supporting the timber structure of the outer dome and the heavy stone lantern that sits on the very top. It is a masterpiece of structural engineering, a brilliant, pragmatic solution born from a deep understanding of physics and forces. You are essentially using a hidden industrial structure to support a work of art. It's the perfect metaphor for your entire approach. A beautiful, harmonious exterior concealing a core of rigorous, uncompromising science. This triple-layered structure is your greatest ornamental variation, an essential change disguised as a simple matter of roofing. And no one on the committee is any the wiser. As the years turn into decades, the cathedral slowly takes shape. You are growing older. You were in your 40s when this began. Now you are in your 50s, then your 60s. Fashions change. The king who commissioned the work, Charles II, is dead. His brother James II has come and gone, deposed in a revolution. William and Mary are on the throne, then Queen Anne. Governments rise and fall, but you remain. You are the constant, the single mind guiding this colossal project across generations. The work is slow, painstaking, and fraught with dangers. Safety standards are, to put it mildly, not what they are today. A fall from the scaffolding is almost certainly a death sentence. The physical toll on the workers is immense. You treat them fairly, paying them regularly, a rarity at the time, but you demand perfection. You work with some of an era's greatest craftsmen, the master carver Grinling Gibbons, whose delicate work in wood is so lifelike it seems to breathe. The blacksmith Zhang Tiju, whose magnificent iron screens and gates are works of art in themselves. You are not just an architect, but a collaborator, a director, harnessing the talents of hundreds to serve your singular vision. But you are also a lonely figure. The sheer scale of your intellect can be isolating. You see the world in terms of geometry, stress loads, and harmonic proportions. You are trying to explain calculus to men who work with plumb bobs and string. There are moments of doubt, times when you lie awake at night, the immense weight of the dome pressing down not on the cathedral's piers, but on your own mind. Have you calculated correctly? Will the brick cone hold? Will your grand deception be discovered? You face criticism from all sides. Some say it's taking too long. Others say it's costing too much. A new generation of architects, younger, more fashionable men, begin to whisper that your style is becoming old-fashioned. You are a relic from another era. They start to meddle, to try and influence the design of the final details through their connections at court. The project becomes a political battlefield. At one point, in a move to force your hand and speed things up, Parliament even votes to withhold half of your salary until the cathedral is officially declared finished. It is a profound and public insult. After dedicating your entire life to this one great work, you are being treated like a tardy contractor. Yet, you persevere. You are driven by a force that goes beyond money or fame. It is the scientist's desire to see a hypothesis proven, the artist's need to bring a vision into the world. And finally, after 35 years of continuous construction, the final stone of the lantern is placed atop the dome. The year is 1710. You are now 78 years old. Your son, also named Christopher, places the last stone while you watch from the ground, too old to make the perilous climb. The cathedral is, for all intents and purposes, complete. It is a triumph. It dominates the skyline, a symbol of a resurrected city, a testament to a new age of reason and science. And it is entirely your vision, smuggled into existence through decades of quiet determination. But your greatest, most subtle trick is still waiting to be discovered, hidden in plain sight. It's the feature that speaks not of your architectural skill, but of your deep, abiding identity as a physicist, the Whispering Gallery. Let's go there now. You walk into the vast, cool space of the cathedral. The scale is designed to humble you, to make you feel small in the presence of the divine. But you are here for the science. You begin the long climb up, 259 steps, spiraling upwards in a tight stone staircase. The air grows cooler. The sounds of the city fade away, replaced by the echo of your own footsteps. You emerge onto a narrow circular walkway that rings the very base of the inner dome. You are 30 meters, about 100 feet, above the cathedral floor. Below you, people look like tiny moving dolls. Above you, the painted dome soars. You are standing in a perfect circle. The wall you are standing next to is a smooth, continuous curve of plaster over brick. There is nothing special about it to the naked eye. It looks like any other wall, but you know better. You designed this curve with a specific mathematical property in mind, a property known as a circular whispering gallery mode. You understood that sound, like light, travels in waves. And you knew that if you created a perfectly smooth, perfectly curved, non-porous surface, something remarkable would happen. The sound waves wouldn't bounce off it randomly and dissipate into the vast space of the dome. Instead, they would cling to the surface, hugging the curve, traveling all the way around the gallery with astonishingly little loss of volume. A phenomenon physicists would later call caustics. You walk to one side of the gallery. An assistant stands at the opposite side, 34 meters 112 feet away. A vast empty chasm separates you. In a normal room, you would have to shout to be heard. Here, you simply turn your face to the wall and whisper. You speak in a low, quiet voice, your words little more than a breath of air. Can you hear me? Your voice doesn't travel across the open space. It glides along the stone. The sound waves creep around the circumference of the dome, a silent, invisible ripple. On the other side, your assistant presses their ear to the wall, and they hear you. They hear your whisper as clearly as if you were standing right next to them. It is magic, but it's the magic of physics. You designed this. It wasn't a happy accident, a charming quirk of the building you stumbled upon later. It was a deliberate, calculated demonstration of your mastery over the unseen forces of the world. In an age of faith, you built a monument to acoustics. You created an experience that feels miraculous, but is, in fact, pure science. The Whispering Gallery is your signature, written in sound waves. It's the final, quiet boast of a man who saw the universe not just as God's creation, but as a system of beautiful, elegant, and understandable laws. For all the compromises you were forced to make, for all the battles you had to fight with the committee, this one perfect secret piece of science was yours and yours alone. For years, you watch your creation settle into the life of the city. It becomes the heart of London, the backdrop for royal weddings, state funerals, and national celebrations. You retire from your post as surveyor, your life's great work now complete. You live out your final years quietly, often returning to the cathedral just to sit and look at what you have made. They say that in your old age, you would have yourself carried in a chair to a spot on the cathedral floor, directly under the center of your great dome, and you would just sit there for hours in silence. Perhaps you were admiring the play of light. Perhaps you were listening to the faint echo of the choir. Or perhaps you were just enjoying the quiet satisfaction of a man who had solved the most complex equation of his life. When you pass away in 1723, at the age of 90, there is a debate about where you should be buried. Some feel you deserve a grand tomb, but your final resting place is simple. You are interred within the crypt of the cathedral itself, the building you gave your life to. Your son composes your epitaph, a simple, elegant inscription in Latin placed on the wall above your tomb. It doesn't list your titles or your accomplishments. It contains no flowery praise. It simply says, Lector, si monumentum requiris, circumspice. Reader, if you seek his monument, look around you. It's the most fitting tribute imaginable, because your monument isn't just the stone and the timber. It's the light that fills the nave. It's the perfect soaring geometry of the dome. It's the awe a visitor feels when they first step inside. And it's the quiet, impossible whisper that still travels, 300 years later, across 100 feet of empty space, a final lingering message from a man who understood the music of the spheres and found a way to capture an echo of it here on Earth. You are not just an architect. You are a scientist, a survivor, a politician, and a quiet rebel. You fought a 35-year battle against committees, compromises, and the stubbornness of the old guard, and you won, not with loud arguments, but with quiet intelligence, cunning patience, and a well-placed clause in a legal document. You proved that genius isn't a single flash of lightning. It's the slow, steady, and relentless application of light over a very, very long time. As our journey through the mind of Christopher Wren and the creation of St. Paul's Dome concludes tonight, we're reminded that the past is far from dusty and dull. It's a vibrant, often surprising, and always intriguing tapestry woven with human ingenuity, resilience, and the occasional ancient mystery that still makes us wonder. This is the Sleeping Archaeologist, encouraging you to remain curious about the incredible tales still waiting to be discovered beneath our feet. Our next story is the 9th century monk who secretly invented your smartphone's operating system. Hope you like it. Let's be honest for a moment. When you think about the origins of that sleek, impossibly powerful little rectangle of glass and metal in your pocket, what comes to mind? You probably picture a garage in California, sometime in the 1970s. You imagine long-haired geniuses in turtlenecks, soldering circuit boards, fueled by lukewarm coffee, and a revolutionary vision of personal computing. The story we tell ourselves is a modern one, a clean narrative of Western innovation, a straight line from a dusty garage to the glowing screen you're probably watching this on right now. It's a nice story. It's simple, it's inspiring, and it fits neatly into our idea of progress. It's also, to put it politely, a load of absolute nonsense. The foundational logic, the very operating system of thought that makes your phone, your computer, and the entire internet function wasn't born in a garage. It wasn't even conceived in the same millennium. It was meticulously crafted in a city of 1 million people, a shining beacon of civilization, at a time when London was a muddy town of about 20,000, and Paris wasn't much better. The essential DNA of our digital world was written down by a man in robes, using a reed pen and ink made of soot, wrestling not with code, but with the eternal, infuriatingly practical problems of inheritance law and land surveying. The entire origin story we've been sold is based on a clerical error of history, a misattribution on a continental scale. It's as if we credited the invention of the light bulb to the guy who changes the bulb instead of the one who figured out electricity. The fundamental principles of how a computer thinks, the step-by-step, logical processes that can solve for any unknown, were laid out over 1,200 years ago. And it was all done by one man, working in the most advanced scientific institution on the planet. That entire origin story is wrong. Tonight, you are Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. The year is a balmy 820 AD. You are a Persian scholar, a mathematician, an astronomer, and a geographer, and your office is in the bustling heart of Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, and, without any serious contest, the center of the known world. You are not a wild-haired inventor in a garage. You are a meticulous, profoundly patient, and slightly world-weary academic who has just been handed an impossibly tedious set of problems by your boss, the Caliph himself. And in the process of solving them, you are about to accidentally write the source code for the next 12 centuries of human history. The proof of your existence, the receipts, as they say, aren't buried in the sand. They exist today, carefully preserved in libraries from Oxford to Berlin. It's a book, your book. Its full title is Al-Kit al-Muqtagar Fef Wisbal Jabr Wal Muqbalaor. For those of us not fluent in 9th century academic Arabic, the compendious book on calculation by completion and balancing. Looking at a surviving manuscript, it's deceptively simple. Page after page of elegant, flowing Arabic script detailing practical word problems about land and money. It looks like a high school textbook, but this book is the historical equivalent of the monolith from 2001, A Space Odyssey. It introduces a way of thinking so revolutionary, so profoundly powerful, that it would take Europe another 400 years just to begin to catch up. Your name, Al-Khwarizmi, will be Latinized and twisted into the word algorithm. The key term from your title, Al-Jabr, will become algebra. This manuscript isn't just a record of your work. It's the birth certificate of the modern world. This discovery, or rather, the rediscovery and translation of your work centuries later, reveals something extraordinary about the hidden in plain sight origins of modern technology. As we settle in tonight, we're going to uncover not just what archaeologists and historians found, but what it tells us about the surprisingly relatable lives of people who lived in 9th century Baghdad. Now dim the lights and prepare to discover why this story will change how you think about the device in your hand. Your day begins not with an alarm, but with a sound that washes over the entire city, a timeless and deeply human call to prayer from 1,000 minarets, echoing across the rooftops as the first hints of dawn streak the eastern sky. You live in Baghdad, the city of peace, Madinat al-Salam, and in 820 AD, it is anything but a sleepy desert outpost. This is the largest city on earth, a sprawling, perfectly circular metropolis engineered by the Caliph al-Mansur decades before your time, a testament to order and ambition. It's home to nearly 1 million souls, a vibrant, chaotic, and intoxicating mix of Arabs, Persians, Africans, Christians, Jews, Muslims, and pagans from the far reaches of the empire. The air itself is thick with the smell of roasting lamb, exotic spices from the Silk Road, fragrant perfumes, and the ever-present slightly acrid scent of the Tigris River flowing patiently through it all. You are not from here, not originally. Your name, Al-Khwarizmi, marks you as a man from Khorazm, a region in Central Asia, now part of modern-day Uzbekistan. You carry the quiet, observant nature of an outsider, a man who sees things with a clarity that locals might miss. You made the long journey here, because this is where a man of intellect has to be. To be a scholar anywhere else in the world right now is like trying to be a world-class surfer in a bathtub. Baghdad is the only ocean that matters. Your destination this morning, as it is every morning, is the reason you came here at all. The Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. Forget any image you have of a dusty, silent library where stern old men go shush. The House of Wisdom is less a library and more a combination of a university, a national science foundation, a translation institute, and the most ambitious think tank in human history. Imagine if MIT, the British Library, and Google's Advanced Research Division all decided to have a baby and raise it in a lavishly decorated palace. It was founded by the Caliph Harun al-Rashid of 1001 Nights fame, but it is his son, your current employer, Caliph Al-Man, who has supercharged it into the intellectual engine of the empire. Al-Man is no distant ceremonial ruler. He is a fanatic for knowledge. He attends academic debates. He funds expeditions to acquire ancient texts, and he pays translators their weight in gold for rendering the works of the Greeks, Ptolemy, Euclid, Aristotle into Arabic. He believes fervently that reason and faith are two wings of the same bird, and he has hired you, and hundreds like you, to help that bird fly. Walking through the gates of the House of Wisdom is like stepping into another world. The chaos of the city streets gives way to shaded courtyards with bubbling fountains. The air is cooler here, filled with the scent of jasmine and the rustle of paper. Here, scholars from across the known world are hunched over desks, their minds wrestling with the greatest ideas of civilization. In one corner, you might see Hunayn ibn Ishaq, a Nestorian Christian physician, painstakingly translating the medical works of Galen from Greek into Syriac, and then into Arabic, his work so precise it would remain the standard for centuries. In another, the three Banu Musa brothers, brilliant Persian engineers, are sketching designs for automatic fountains and mechanical toys, dabbling in concepts that flirt with robotics. Debates are happening everywhere, in hushed but intense tones, in a dozen different languages. It is a symphony of pure intellect, and it is your workplace. You find your own small, accustomed space. Your tools are simple, elegant, and familiar. A set of reed pens, a callum, which you've sharpened yourself to a perfect razor-thin point. An inkwell filled with a dark, rich ink made from a careful mixture of carbon soot, gum arabic, and water. Your canvas is not yet parchment, which is expensive, but paper. This is a revolutionary new technology, a secret learned from Chinese prisoners of war, and Baghdad has become one of the first cities in the world to have its own paper mills. The paper is smoother, cheaper, and more absorbent than anything that came before it. It's the 9th century equivalent of upgrading from a dial-up modem to fiber optic internet. It changes the speed at which ideas can travel. You settle in, the day's work before you. But it's not some abstract, philosophical puzzle you're pondering. The Caliph, for all his love of pure knowledge, is an intensely practical man. He needs things solved. He needs a more accurate star chart to improve navigation for his vast trading empire. He needs better astronomical tables to determine the precise direction of Mecca from any point in the caliphate for prayer. And most pressingly, he has a headache. A bureaucratic, legal, and mathematical headache of epic proportions. Islamic inheritance law. The rules of inheritance laid out in the Quran are specific and complex. A widow gets an eighth. A daughter gets a half of what a son gets. Parents get a sixth, and so on. When you combine this with outstanding debts, bequests to non-relatives, and multiple family members, the calculations become a nightmare. Local judges and administrators are tearing their hair out, trying to solve these real-world problems with the clumsy mathematical tools they have. They are using a hodgepodge of methods, some Greek geometry, some old Babylonian techniques, and a lot of just plain guesswork. It's slow, it's prone to error, and it's causing endless legal disputes. The Caliph has tasked you, one of his premier mathematicians, with a simple-sounding request. Create a system. A reliable, straightforward, and universal method that any educated person can use to solve these problems, once and for all. He wants a user-friendly guide to financial calculation. He has no idea what he has just unleashed. This is the central conflict of your professional life. The tension between the pure, beautiful world of abstract numbers and the messy, chaotic, and frustratingly practical demands of the real world. You have spent years studying the great mathematical traditions that have flowed into Baghdad like tributaries into the Tigris. From the Greeks, you have the rigor of geometry, the elegant logic of Euclid's proofs. From the Babylonians and Egyptians, you have a legacy of practical, problem-solving mathematics. But the most important import, a true game-changer, comes from India. It's a set of 9 simple symbols and a 10th revolutionary concept, a symbol for nothing, a placeholder. The zero. You and your colleagues in the House of Wisdom are among the first people outside of India to truly grasp the power of this system. Before this, you had to deal with things like Roman numerals, and you have a quiet, burning disdain for Roman numerals. It's a system designed by someone who hated mathematicians. Trying to do long division with Roman numerals is a form of psychological torture. How do you divide CXC by 7? You can't. You have to use an abacus, moving beads around, and then write down the answer. The calculation itself isn't happening on the page. It's a terrible user interface. A complete mess. But the Indian system, which we now call the Hindu-Arabic numerals, is a miracle of elegance. With just 10 symbols, including the 0, you can represent any number imaginable. And more importantly, you can perform complex calculations right there on the paper. It's a software upgrade for the human brain. You are one of its earliest and most passionate adopters. You even write a whole book about it, on the calculation with Hindu numerals, which, when it's eventually translated into Latin centuries later, will be the primary vehicle that introduces this system to a mathematically backward Europe. They will be so impressed they'll call it algorithm, a garbled version of your name. For a while, your very name becomes the word for mathematics. It's a strange, posthumous sort of fame you can't possibly imagine. Yet even with this powerful new number system, the inheritance problem remains. The problem isn't the calculation itself. It's the structure of the problems. They are all word problems, narrative puzzles. A man dies and leaves 100 diners. He has a wife, a son, and 2 daughters. He also owes a debt of 10 diners to a friend. How is the estate divided? Each problem is a unique story, requiring a custom-built solution. There's no single underlying method. It's like being a master carpenter who has to invent a new tool for every single cut of wood. It's inefficient. It's maddening. You spend months, maybe even years, immersed in these problems. You fill sheets of precious paper with calculations. You stare at the numbers until they swim before your eyes. You are searching for a pattern, a hidden language beneath the surface of these individual puzzles. The pressure is immense, not just from the caliph, but from yourself. You are a man who believes in an orderly universe, a cosmos governed by rational principles. God, in your view, is the ultimate mathematician. Surely, there must be a more elegant way, a universal key that can unlock all of these problems at once. The struggle is immense. You are at the very edge of the known mathematical world, with no one to guide you. You are trying to invent a new language. You have the words, the Indian numerals, but you don't have the grammar. You try applying geometric solutions, drawing squares and rectangles as the Greeks did, but it's cumbersome. It only works for certain types of problems. You try using simple arithmetic, but it gets tangled in the complexity of the rules. You feel like you're walking in circles in a dark room, convinced there's a door somewhere, if only you could find the handle. Day after day, you sit with these problems. You categorize them. You notice that many of them, once you strip away the story about wives and sons in diners, boil down to a few basic relationships between known quantities and one unknown quantity. The thing they're all trying to find. This unknown thing is what vexes you. It doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a symbol. It's a ghost in the machine. And you realize, in a moment of profound clarity that will echo through the ages, that the first step to taming something is to give it a name. In Arabic, the word for thing is shay. So you begin to call the unknown quantity in your equations shay. This humble generic word will travel through Spain into Europe, where it will be written as shay. And since Spanish scholars can't easily pronounce the sh sound, they will shorten it to just its first letter, X. You have just given a name to the ultimate mystery variable. But naming, it is only the first step. You need a way to manipulate it, to isolate it, to force it to reveal its value. You keep working, scribbling on your paper, the scratching of your reed pen, the only sound in your small alcove. You notice that all the messy, complicated problems can can be boiled down to a handful of standard forms. An equation where squares of the unknown are equal to its roots, or where squares are equal to a number, or where roots and numbers are equal to a square. You realize you can create a taxonomy of problems. And then comes the true breakthrough, the twin concepts that will form the bedrock of your new science. You realize that no matter how complex the equation, you can simplify it down to its essentials using two fundamental operations. The first is what you call algebra. This word originally means reuniting or completion, like setting a broken bone. In your system, it means taking a negative quantity from one side of an equation and moving it to the other side, where it becomes a positive quantity. It's an act of restoration, of making the equation whole and positive. For example, if you have x2x equals 10, you perform algebra to restore the minus 2x, moving it to the other side to get x squared equals 10 plus 2x. You've just tidied up reality. The second operation is its partner, which you call al-muqbala, meaning the balancing or the confrontation. This is the act of canceling out identical quantities that appear on both sides of the equation. If you have x squared plus 5x equals 10 5x, you perform al-muqbala to remove the 5x from both sides, simplifying it to x squared equals 10. It's an act of reduction, of stripping the problem down to its bare essence. It's like realizing you've put salt in the stew twice and taking one of the salt shakers off the table. These two principles, al-jabr and al-muqbala, are the engine of your new system. They are simple, they are powerful, and they are universal. They allow you to take any linear or quadratic equation, the kind that constantly pops up in those inheritance problems, and rearrange it, simplify it, and solve it. You have done it. You have created the universal key. You have invented a machine made of pure logic. You have invented algebra. You can scarcely contain your excitement. This is more than just a tool for calculating inheritances. This is a new way of thinking. Before you, mathematics was largely the study of specific numbers and shapes. You've introduced a method for reasoning about quantities in the abstract. You've created a system that allows one to solve for a whole class of problems, not just one at a time. It's a leap in abstraction as profound as the invention of writing. Now you have to write it all down. You begin composing your masterpiece, the compendious book on calculation by completion and balancing. You don't write it for other elite mathematicians. The Caliph wanted a practical guide, and you are a practical man. You write it for everyone. You begin not with abstract symbols, but with words. You explain everything in plain language, laying out the basic principles of al-jabr and al-muqbala. You then present the 6 standard types of equations that can be solved with your method, and you provide a clear, step-by-step recipe for solving each one. For example, for an equation in the form squares and roots equal to a number, what we'd write as x squared plus bx equals c. You lay out the procedure. Take half the roots, multiply it by itself, add this to the number, then take the square root of the total. From this, subtract half the roots. The remainder is the root of the square. It's a recipe, a set of instructions. It's an algorithm. You've given the world not just a theory, but a practical, repeatable procedure for finding the truth. You follow this with dozens and dozens of worked examples, all drawn from the real-world problems you were given: inheritance, land measurement, commercial transactions. You are proving page by page that your abstract system can solve the messiest problems of human life. The physical act of creating this book is painstaking. Each character is written by hand with your column. The ink has to be just right, not too thick or it will blot, not too thin or it will run. Paper is precious, and you cannot afford mistakes. You write with intense concentration, your back aching from hours of hunching over your low desk. But with every page, you feel the weight of a new world taking shape. This is your legacy, you know it. This is more important than the astronomical tables you've helped compile, more important than the world map you've helped draw for the Caliph. This is a tool for thinking. Once completed, copies of your book begin to circulate. The House of Wisdom acts as a distribution hub. Scribes, whose entire profession is the careful and accurate duplication of texts, create new copies. These copies travel across the Islamic world, from Córdoba in Spain to Samarkand in your native Central Asia. Your methods are picked up by other mathematicians who build upon your work, adding new layers of sophistication. But your book remains the foundation, the primary textbook on algebra for the next several hundred years. It is so clear, so practical, and so complete that it becomes the undisputed authority. For centuries, your work flourishes in the Arabic-speaking world. But to the north, in Europe, the so-called Dark Ages are in full swing. Knowledge is fragmented, classical texts are lost, and mathematical understanding is rudimentary at best. They are still wrestling with Roman numerals. They are centuries behind. The eventual discovery of your work by the West is not so much an archaeological dig as it is a slow, dawning realization by European scholars that a more advanced civilization just next door has already solved problems they are still struggling with. The main point of contact is Spain, Al-Andalus, where Muslim, Jewish, and Christian cultures intermingle. It is here, in the 12th century, 300 years after you put down your pen, that your book is first encountered by a curious English scholar named Robert of Chester. He is astounded. Here is a mathematical system more advanced than anything he has ever seen. In 1145, he undertakes the laborious task of translating your work from Arabic into Latin, the language of scholarship in Europe. This translation is the artifact, the vessel that carries your ideas across the cultural divide. In his preface, Robert of Chester writes, "Lest the Western world be left in ignorance." He is revealing this new art. He doesn't know what to call this new science, so he simply transliterates the key word from your title. Algebra becomes, in the clunky phonetics of Latin, algebra. And so your system gets its Western name. Your own name, Al-Khwarizmi, proves a bit trickier for the Latin tongue. It gets mangled into algorithmi, because your book on Hindu numerals begins with the phrase Dixit algorithmi. Algorithmi says, the very process of calculation using these new numerals becomes known as algorithmus, which eventually morphs into the word algorithm. Your name becomes a verb, a concept, a fundamental pillar of a new world. The impact is not immediate. It's a slow burn. But your book, now in Latin, spreads through the nascent universities of Europe. It allows for the development of more complex accounting, which fuels the Italian mercantile empires. It enables more sophisticated engineering, leading to better architecture and machinery. It provides the mathematical language that astronomers like Copernicus and Kepler will one day use to remodel the heavens. You have given them the tools to build the Renaissance. You, a 9th century Persian scholar from Baghdad, have laid the foundation for the European scientific revolution. It is perhaps the most significant and least acknowledged technology transfer in human history. As you sit at your desk in the House of Wisdom, finishing a calculation, you, of course, know none of this. You cannot imagine a world of machines that can perform millions of these calculations in the blink of an eye. You cannot conceive of a global network built entirely on the logical principles you are now formalizing. The idea that your step-by-step procedures would one day guide everything from the flight path of an airplane to the recommendation engine on a video streaming service would be utterly alien to you. Your world is one of ink and paper, of quiet contemplation, and the satisfying click of an intellectual puzzle falling into place. You are motivated by a desire for elegance, for order, and for practical solutions. You see a messy world full of complicated problems, and you believe that with reason and a proper system, you can make it a little less messy. You are a tidier, a rationalist, a man who believes in the power of a good, clean equation. When you look back on your work, you are proud, but in a quiet, scholarly way. You have created something useful. You have served your caliph. You have brought a new level of clarity to the world of numbers. You have, you hope, made the difficult task of dividing an estate just a little bit easier for some beleaguered judge in a provincial town. That is the scale of your ambition. It's a profoundly human one. You are not trying to invent the future. You are just trying to solve the problems of the present. The great irony, the one that should make us all pause when we look at our glowing screens, is that the digital age was born from this deeply analog, deeply human impulse. The logic that powers the most complex technology we have ever created was invented to ensure a widow received her proper 1/8 share of her late husband's property. It's a moment of historical bathos, so profound it's almost beautiful. The entire edifice of our modern world rests on a foundation laid by a man who was, in essence, trying to build a better spreadsheet for inheritance law. You will go on to do other great things. You will help create a map of the world for Caliph al-Min that is far more accurate than any that came before it. You will revise the astronomical work of Ptolemy, correcting and improving upon the knowledge of the ancient Greeks. You will write on the astrolabe and the sundial. You will be one of the most productive and influential scientists of your age. But it is that slim volume, your compendious book, that will be your ghost in the machine of history. It is the artifact that proves that progress is not a straight line, and that the roots of our modernity are deeper, more complex, and more wonderfully multicultural than we ever bother to imagine. The operating system on your phone was not written in California. It was written in Baghdad. It was not written in code. It was written in elegant Arabic script by a man you've now spent a little time with, a man named al-Khwarizmi. And his work is a quiet but persistent reminder that the greatest ideas in history often come not from a sudden flash of genius, but from the patient, humble, and deeply human effort to solve a simple, practical problem. The next time you ask your phone for directions, or to solve a math problem, or to find a piece of information, take a moment. Somewhere in the silent, lightning-fast cascade of ones and zeros that makes it all possible is the echo of a reed pen scratching on paper 1,200 years ago in a sun-drenched courtyard in the City of Peace. As our journey through the life and work of al-Khwarizmi concludes tonight, we're reminded that the past is far from dusty and dull. It's a vibrant, often surprising, and always intriguing tapestry, woven with human ingenuity, resilience, and the occasional ancient mystery that still makes us wonder. This is the Sleeping Archaeologist, encouraging you to remain curious about the incredible tales still waiting to be discovered beneath our feet. Our next story is the Roman lighthouse still working after 1,900 years. Hope you like it. We have this funny little idea about the Roman Empire. We picture it in shades of picturesque decay. We see noble, crumbling aqueducts, their arches framing a perfect Tuscan sunset. We imagine the Forum in Rome, a beautiful, haunting jumble of fallen columns and marble fragments where tourists now pose for selfies with pigeons. The whole brand of Roman engineering, for all its legendary might, seems to be built on a foundation of eventual, graceful collapse. We treat their infrastructure like a brilliant piece of technology from a bygone era like the first iPhone. Revolutionary for its time, mind-blowingly advanced, but ultimately, a museum piece you can actually use to order a pizza. It's a lovely, romantic notion, this empire of elegant ruins. That idea is completely wrong. Tonight, you are a Roman architect. Your name is Caius Civius Lupus, and you are a citizen from Eminium in the province of Lusitania. It's the late 1st century AD, under the reign of the Emperor Trajan, a man who appreciates a good, solid public works project. You are standing on a wind-battered cliff in the far northwestern corner of Hispania, a place the locals call Brigantium, and you are about to build something. You're not building another graceful ruin for future postcards. You are about to construct a piece of critical infrastructure so absurdly over-engineered, so stubbornly defiant of time, weather, and the corrosive cynicism of history, that it will still be doing its job almost 2,000 years later. The artifact that serves as your eternal performance review is, of course, the tower itself. Not a ruin, but a fully operational lighthouse. Known today as the Tower of Hercules, it stands on that same cliff, its Roman core still intact, its lantern still casting a beam across the treacherous Atlantic waters. Imagine finding a Roman chariot in some muddy field, and not only does it work, but the original horses are still there, impatiently pawing the ground, ready for a race. That's the level of historical absurdity we're dealing with. The tower's continued existence isn't just a happy accident. It's the physical receipt for your work, a stone and mortar testament that forced historians and engineers to admit that some Roman technology wasn't built to last for an era. It was built to last forever. This structure, standing proudly in modern-day Acuruca, Spain, reveals something extraordinary about Roman engineering, ambition, and the forgotten frontiers of the empire. As we settle in tonight, we're going to uncover not just what archaeologists found, but what it tells us about the surprisingly relatable lives of people who lived in Roman Galatia at the turn of the 2nd century A.D. Now dim the lights and prepare to discover why this story will change how you think about the meaning of permanence. The first thing you notice about this place is the wind. It's not like the gentle breezes of Lusitania that carry the scent of olive groves and sun-baked earth. This is a different beast entirely. It's a physical presence, a constant whining pressure that pushes against your cloak and seems to scour the very thoughts from your head. It carries the heavy, wet smell of salt and cold stone and something else, something wild and ancient that clings to the green, rolling hills. This is the edge of the world, at least the edge of the world as any respectable Roman knows it. Finis terrae. You've seen the maps. Beyond this point, there is only the mare externum, the outer sea, an endless trimming gray expanse that leads to the realm of monsters and myths. And your job is to build a star on its shore. Your journey here was long. Weeks by ship, hugging the coastline north from your home in Eminium, what will one day be called Coimbra in Portugal. You watched the familiar, civilized landscape of southern Hispania, with its sprawling latifundia and well-ordered towns, slowly give way to something wilder. The mountains grew steeper, the forests darker. The coastline became a jagged, brutal thing, a series of rocky teeth gnawing at the Atlantic. This stretch of water has a reputation. They call it the Costa da Morte, the coast of death. It's a ship graveyard, a place where fortunes in tin from Britannia or gold from the local mines can be swallowed by a sudden fog or a rogue wave. And that is why you are here. The Emperor Trajan, a practical man of Spanish origin himself, understands the importance of commerce. The sea lanes are the arteries of the empire, and right now, this one is bleeding ships and money. He needs a fix. You are that fix. Brigantium isn't much of a city. It's more of a port, a toehold of Roman order on a wild coast. It huddles around a natural harbor, a collection of sturdy stone buildings, warehouses, a barracks for a small legionary detachment, and a few villas for officials like yourself. Looking up from the port, you can see the hills dotted with the strange circular stone huts of the locals, the Galaici. They are Celts, a people of fierce warriors and skilled metalworkers who gave the legions a terrible headache not so long ago. They're pacified now, of course, which is a polite Roman way of saying they've learned that arguing with a well-drilled legion is a spectacularly bad way to spend an afternoon. Still, you feel their presence. You hear their strange, lyrical tongue in the market, a language that sounds nothing like the crisp, declarative Latin of your engineers. You are an outsider here, a representative of the power that governs their lives but doesn't truly understand them. Your villa is functional, not luxurious. The mosaic floors are simple geometric patterns, not the elaborate mythological scenes you'd see in Emerita Augusta. The hypocaust heating system fights a valiant but often losing battle against the damp chill that seems to seep through the very stones. Your evenings are spent not at lavish dinner parties, but hunched over a heavy wooden table, examining architectural plans drawn on expensive papyrus. Your companions are a clay lamp sputtering with olive oil, a cup of rough local wine that tastes faintly of the sea, and the constant moaning symphony of the wind outside your window. The pressure on you is immense. This isn't just another provincial building project. This is an imperial commission. The dispatch from Rome, bearing the emperor's seal, made that abundantly clear. The lighthouse, or ferrum, must be a statement. It must be a beacon of Roman power, a symbol of civilization's triumph over the chaotic ocean. It must be visible for leagues, a steady, unwavering point of light in the maelstrom. And it must stand for generations. Your reputation, your career, and a not insignificant amount of imperial funds are riding on your ability to tame this wild piece of coastline with geometry, stone, and Roman concrete. As you drift off to sleep each night, the sound of the waves crashing on the rocks below your cliffside building site is a constant reminder of the formidable opponent you have agreed to face. You are here to build a mountain that shines, and you are starting to suspect it might be the most difficult thing you have ever done. Your days fall into a rhythm dictated by sunlight, tides, and the stubborn realities of ancient construction. You rise before dawn, the air in your room cold enough to see your breath. A simple breakfast of bread, cheese, and watered wine, and then you walk to the site. The promontory where the tower will rise is a hive of activity. The air rings with the clang of hammers on iron, the grating screech of stone being cut and dressed, the shouts of foremen, and the low rhythmic chanting of laborers hauling massive granite blocks. You are, in modern terms, the lead architect and project manager, a job that involves far more people skills than you were ever taught. Your team is a motley crew. The Corps is a detachment of legionary engineers, men from the Legio 7 Gemina. They are disciplined, precise, and masters of logistics. Their leader is a centurion named Marcus, a grizzled veteran with a face like a crumpled map, and a belief that any problem, architectural or otherwise, can be solved with sufficient application of brute force and organized swearing. He sees your delicate papyrus scrolls, covered in calculations and geometric proofs, and seems to view them with deep suspicion, as if they are a form of dark magic. He trusts stone, iron, and the sweat of his men. You've learned to translate your complex designs into simple, direct orders that he can appreciate. You don't talk about tensile strength. You talk about making it soldier-proof. The bulk of the labor force is local. Galatian men, strong and wiry, hired for their muscle. They are quarrying the granite from the nearby hills, hauling it on heavy wooden carts pulled by oxen, and doing the grueling work of lifting the blocks into place. Communication is a challenge. A few know some vulgar Latin, but mostly you rely on gestures, diagrams drawn in the dirt, and the universal language of a foreman's exasperated sigh. You watch them work, and you see in their faces a mixture of resentment and pragmatism. You are the Roman conqueror, but you are also the man providing a steady wage. It's a complicated, unspoken relationship that hangs in the salty air. Your biggest challenge, the one that keeps you up at night, is the material science. The outer skin of the tower will be local granite, a beautiful, durable stone that can stand up to the wind and salt spray. But the core, the true strength of the structure, will be Roman concrete. Opus cementitium. This is your secret weapon, the miracle material that allows you to build on a scale that would have been impossible a few centuries ago. But it requires a specific recipe, a mixture of lime, rubble, and most importantly, pozzolana. This volcanic ash, sourced from the Bay of Naples, is what gives the concrete its incredible hydraulic properties, its ability to set and harden even underwater. Getting a steady supply of pozzolana to the literal end of the earth is a logistical nightmare. It has to be shipped in amphorae all the way from Italy, a perilous journey that takes months. Every single ship that arrives in the harbor of Brigantium, carrying that precious gray dust, feels like a personal victory. You inspect each delivery yourself, running the fine ash through your fingers, feeling its texture, knowing that this is the stuff that will bind your legacy together. One delayed shipment, one vessel lost to a storm, could bring the entire project to a grinding halt for a season. It's like trying to bake a cake where the flour is delivered, one cup at a time, from 1,000 miles away by a notoriously unreliable messenger. The design of the tower itself is your masterpiece. It's not just a column of stone. It's a carefully engineered system. You've designed it with a square base, a solid, reassuring Roman shape that contrasts with the circular dwellings of the locals. It is a declaration of order. The tower will rise over 50 meters, tapering slightly as it goes, a subtle trick to enhance its stability and create an illusion of even greater height. But the real genius, you believe, is on the inside. Instead of a narrow, winding staircase, you have designed a continuous, gently sloping ramp that spirals up the interior of the tower. This will allow for the easy transport of fuel wood, mostly to the lantern at the top. Oxen, or at least very determined men with carts, will be able to haul tons of timber to the summit each day. It's a practical solution to a practical problem. The tower isn't just a monument. It's a machine that must be fed. Your days are a blur of problem solving. A section of scaffolding collapses in a sudden gust of wind. A dispute breaks out between a Roman legionary and a local worker over a stolen wineskin. A critical shipment of bronze for the lantern's great mirror is delayed in Gades. Each day brings a new crisis that you must manage with a calm, authoritative air you don't always feel. In the evenings, you pore over your plans, double-checking your calculations for wind shear and load-bearing capacity. You are building something that has no precedent in this part of the world. There is no manual to consult, no older, wiser architect to ask for advice. There is only you, your knowledge of mathematics and engineering, and the ceaseless testing roar of the Atlantic. And as the foundations are laid and the first course of granite blocks is set, you feel a thrill of both terror and exhilarating pride. The work has begun. The mountain is starting to rise. You are a Romang, a creature of cities, order, and predictable seasons. But here, in Galatia, you are a guest in a land that operates on an older, wilder set of rules. Your life is largely confined to the construction site and the small Roman settlement, but you are always aware of the world just beyond your ordered existence. From the top of the rising tower, you can see the entire landscape laid out before you. The deep green of the hills, almost unnaturally vibrant from the constant rain. The dense, dark forests that locals whisper are home to spirits and gods your Roman pantheon has never heard of. And the castros, the fortified hilltop settlements of the Galatae, their circular stone walls like ancient weathered crowns on the peaks. These people, the Galatae, are a constant, quiet presence. They trade in the port, selling fish, wool, and exquisite, intricate gold jewelry that speaks of a long and sophisticated artistic tradition. You buy a torque, a heavy, twisted gold necklace for your wife back in Eminium, marveling at the craftsmanship. These are not the simple barbarians some of your colleagues in Rome imagine. They have a deep, almost mystical connection to this land, a connection you, with your straight roads and square buildings, can't fully grasp. You've made an effort to learn about their beliefs, mostly out of professional curiosity. Your tower is a work of public utility, but it is also a monumental undertaking, and such things require divine favor. Your official dedication, of course, will be to a proper Roman god. You've chosen Mars. It's a smart political move. Mars is the father of Romulus, the progenitor of the Roman people. But he is also the god of war, a nod to the legions who secured this territory. A dedication to him is a powerful statement of Roman might and piety. Yet you've heard the whispers from your local laborers. They speak of their own gods, deities of the sea, the wind, and the stone. gods with names that twist the Latin tongue. You wonder if to them, your great tower is a sacrilege, a stone needle driven into their sacred land. Or perhaps they see it differently. Perhaps they see a new, powerful spirit being raised, one that might protect their sailors as well as your merchant ships. To bridge this gap, you make a quiet decision. The dedication will be to Mars, yes, but you will incorporate local traditions into the foundation ceremony. You will allow their priests to make their own offerings, to speak their own blessings in their own tongue. It is a small compromise, a gesture of respect, and a practical insurance policy. In a place this wild, you can't afford to offend any god, Rama or otherwise. The social life in Brigantium is minimal. In the evenings, you sometimes share a meal with the commander of the local garrison or the port administrator. The conversation is always the same. Complaints about the weather, gossip from the last ship to arrive from Tarraco, and speculation about the ever-present threat of piracy along the coast. It's a small, isolated community of Romans, bound together by their shared duty and a common feeling of being very far from home. You find yourself missing the simple things, the familiar taste of the wine from your own province, the intellectual debates in the forum, the comforting anonymity of a large city. Here, you are always Caius Civius Lupus, the architect. Your identity is your job. One day, an old Galatian man who works as a water carrier on the site approaches you. He is ancient, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, but his eyes are sharp. He speaks broken Latin, but he points to the tower, then out to the sea, and then he makes a gesture of a light shining. He smiles, a nearly toothless grin, and nods. In that moment, you understand something profound. He isn't seeing a symbol of Roman occupation. He is seeing a promise that his son, a fisherman, might have a better chance of returning home safely from the sea. Your tower is not just a projection of imperial power. It is a genuinely useful thing. It is a gift. The realization settles a deep sense of peace within you. You are not just a conqueror. You are a builder. And what you are building will serve everyone, Roman and Galatian alike, who is brave enough to sail these waters. It's a purpose that transcends politics and empire. It is simply human. Then the first great winter storm arrives. It is not like a storm you have ever experienced. It is a siege. For 3 days, the sky turns a bruised, slate gray, and the sun vanishes. The wind becomes a physical wall, a solid force that makes it impossible to stand upright on the cliffs. It howls with 1,000 different voices, a chorus of shrieks, moans, and roars that seems to emanate from the very throat of the ocean. Rain doesn't fall. It drives horizontally, thick as lead shot, stinging any exposed skin. From the relative safety of your villa, you watch the sea. The calm harbor is transformed into a boiling cauldron. Waves, the size of small hills, march in from the horizon and explode against the cliffs in mushroom clouds of white spray. The sound is a constant, deafening thunder that vibrates through the floor and rattles the pottery on your shelves. You can't sleep. You lie awake, listening to the fury of the storm, and all you can think about is the tower. It's only half finished, a jagged stone stump rising perhaps 20 meters into the sky. The wooden scaffolding, which just days ago seemed so sturdy, now looks like a fragile skeleton clinging to the stone. You imagine the wind tearing it apart, sending planks and beams cartwheeling into the sea. You imagine the waves, reaching impossibly high, crashing against the base of the tower itself, testing the mortar, searching for any weakness in your foundation. Every crash of thunder, every particularly violent gust of wind, feels like a direct assault on your work. Marcus, the centurion, had insisted on securing the site before the storm hit. His men had lashed down everything that could be moved, reinforced the scaffolding with extra ropes, and built temporary windbreaks. At the time, you thought it was excessive. Now you realize his gruff paranoia was the wisdom of experience. He knows this enemy. He has fought it before. On the second day of the storm, a messenger, soaked to the bone and shivering, arrives from the port. A grain ship, trying to ride out the storm in the bay, has broken its anchor lines and been smashed to pieces on the rocks just beyond the harbor mouth. There were no survivors. The news hits you like a physical blow. This is not an abstract problem. These are the lives you are trying to save. The loss of the ship and its crew sharpens your resolve into a hard, cold point. The tower isn't a vanity project. It is a matter of life and death. When the storm finally breaks on the fourth morning, the silence is almost as shocking as the noise had been. A weak, watery sun emerges, illuminating a scene of devastation. The coastline is littered with wreckage. The fields are flooded. But as you walk, heart in your throat, towards the construction site, you see it. The tower is still standing. The scaffolding is battered, with sections torn away, but it holds. The stone structure itself is untouched, solid, and defiant. It looks as if it has shrugged off the worst the Atlantic could throw at it. You run your hand over the cold, wet granite of the lowest course of blocks. They are immovable, solid as the bedrock they are built upon. A wave of relief, so profound it almost brings you to your knees, washes over you. Your calculations were correct. The foundation is sound. The concrete is holding. You look at Marcus, who is already organizing his men to start repairs, and he gives you a rare, almost smile. "Good stone," he grunts, "and it is the highest praise you have ever received." The storm was a test, a brutal examination set by the god of the sea. And you have passed. You now know, with a certainty that settles deep in your bones, that this tower will stand. You just have to finish it. The years pass, not one or two, but closer to a decade. A project of this magnitude, in a location this remote, does not happen quickly. The tower grows slowly, course by course, a testament to relentless, grinding persistence. You watch seasons turn from the top of the ever higher structure. You see Galician winters shroud the hills in mist and rain, followed by brief, glorious summers where the ocean turns from gray to a deep, shimmering blue. Children you saw playing in the port have grown into young men who now work on the site. You have become a fixture in Brigantium, a part of the landscape as permanent as the cliffs themselves. There are triumphs and setbacks. The complex system of wooden cranes, powered by massive treadmills, operated by teams of laborers, works flawlessly, lifting granite blocks weighing several tons to the upper levels. It's a ballet of engineering, a dance of ropes, pulleys, and raw human power that you direct from below. But there are accidents. A rope snaps. A man falls. You preside over the funerals, speaking empty Latin platitudes over men whose language you never truly learned. Your gut hollow with a mixture of guilt and responsibility. The tower demands its price in sweat, and sometimes in blood. The single most difficult piece of the entire project is the lantern. At the very top of the tower, you must build a chamber to house the fire. And above that fire, a great mirror, a marvel of metallurgy, must be mounted. It is a massive, concave dish of highly polished bronze, designed to catch the light of the fire and project it out to sea as a single powerful beam. The bronze itself had to be imported, an alloy of copper and tin from the farthest reaches of the empire. The casting was done on site in a massive, specially built clay mold, a process so tense and dangerous that the entire workforce gathered to watch in silence. When the mold was broken and the mirror emerged, a perfect gleaming bronze disc, the cheer that went up from the men could be heard in the town below. Finally, the day comes. The last block is laid. The last of the scaffolding is removed. The tower stands complete, a clean, powerful column of pale gray granite against the sky. It is taller than any building for 1,000 miles in any direction. It is stark, unadorned, and beautiful in its brutal functionality. It doesn't soar, it commands. It is a Roman sentence written in stone, and it says simply, "We are here." The dedication ceremony is a grand affair. The provincial governor travels up from Asturica, Augusta. Legionary standards gleam in the sun. There are sacrifices, speeches, and a great feast. You stand beside the governor, dressed in your finest toga, feeling strangely disconnected from it all. Your mind is on the final, crucial step. As dusk falls, you climb the great internal ramp for the first time with the lantern keepers. The air inside the tower is cool and still, smelling of fresh mortar and stone dust. The climb is long, a steady, spiraling ascent into darkness. Your footsteps and the panting breaths of the men carrying bundles of wood are the only sounds. When you emerge onto the top platform, the view steals your breath. The world is laid out below you, a tapestry of darkening green land and silver sea, stretching to a horizon stained with the last colors of sunset. The wind up here is a living thing, a constant, powerful river of air. The men build a great pyre in the lantern chamber, a carefully constructed stack of seasoned oak. At your signal, they light it. The fire catches slowly at first, then roars to life, a blazing orange heart in the stone chest of the tower. The heat is intense. The light floods the chamber and pours out through the great arches, painting the clifftop in flickering, dramatic light. The true magic happens when the men position the great bronze mirror behind the flames. The effect is instantaneous and astonishing. The scattered, radiant light of the bonfire is gathered, focused, and projected outwards in a single, searingly bright beam. It is a spear of pure light, cutting a brilliant white path across the darkening sea. It is a man-made star, a new constellation for a new age. You stand there for a long time, watching the beam sweep across the water. You can see it illuminating the sails of distant fishing boats, transforming them into tiny, ghostly moths. You think of the sailors on those boats, seeing this impossible light for the first time, a beacon of hope and safety in the treacherous night. You think of all the years of labor, the setbacks, the sweat, the cost, and you know, with a certainty that fills your entire being, that it was all worth it. You, Caius Civius Lupus, an architect from a provincial town, have done more than build a tower. You have conquered the darkness. You have placed a candle in the window of the world. In your final years in Brigantium, as the tower becomes an established, reliable feature of the coastline, you take time to ensure your legacy is remembered. At the base of the great structure, on the rock of the cliff itself, you commission an inscription. You are not a vain man, but you are a Ramon. You understand the power of the written word, its ability to speak across centuries. An architect's work should be signed. The stonecutters, men you have worked with for years, carefully carve the letters you have composed. It is a simple, pious dedication. It names you Caius Civius Lupus, an architect from Eminium in Lusitania, fulfilling a vow. And it dedicates the work, in accordance with Roman tradition, to the god Mars, Marti August, SACR, C. Civius Lupus Architectus Eminiensis Lusitanis ex voto, to August Mars, a sacred offering. Caius Civius Lupus, architect of Eminium, a Lusitanian, in fulfillment of a vow. You run your fingers over the freshly cut letters, feeling the crisp, sharp edges of the V-cut serifs. You wonder who will read these words in the future. Will your name be spoken a century from now? 2 centuries? The idea seems absurdly optimistic. Empires rise and fall. Buildings crumble. Even the greatest works of men are eventually reclaimed by nature. You look up at the immense, solid tower, and you allow yourself a moment of hope. Perhaps this one thing will last. Perhaps its sheer utility will protect it. As long as men sail the sea, they will need a light to guide them. Perhaps this functional purpose will be its salvation, long after the memory of Trajan and his empire has faded into myth. This is the part of the story where the archaeology becomes so perfect, so satisfying, it feels like it was scripted. Because we know your name. We know where you were from. We know who you dedicated the tower to. We know all this because that inscription you carved is still there. It was discovered, protected, and preserved at the base of the tower. It is the signature on the masterpiece. Your hope that your name would be spoken across the centuries was not optimistic. It was, in fact, an epic understatement. And the tower itself? It did not crumble. It did not fall. It simply worked. For 400 years, it guided Roman shipping. When the Roman Empire in the West collapsed, the light went out, but the tower remained. It stood through the Dark Ages, a silent, monolithic giant on the coast. The Vikings saw it and called it Forum Brigantium. It became a fortress in the Middle Ages. It was stripped of its outer granite blocks to build the city walls, revealing the Roman concrete core beneath, like a body being flayed to show the strength of the bones inside. But it was so fundamentally well built, so absurdly strong, that it never fell. In the 18th century, long after your name had been forgotten and rediscovered, a new age of commerce dawned. The Spanish king ordered the tower to be restored. An architect named Eustachio Giannini, a man you would have likely respected, was given the task. He didn't tear it down. He recognized the genius of the original design. He encased your Roman core in a new neoclassical granite shell, protecting it forever. He rebuilt the lantern, and he lit the fire once more. The light you first kindled, that beam that cut through the darkness on the edge of the Roman world, was rekindled. And it has never gone out since. Your tower is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the only Roman lighthouse in the world that is still in operation, performing the exact same function for which you designed it almost 2 millennia ago. The ships it guides are no longer Roman galleys laden with tin, but massive container ships and steel-hulled fishing trawlers. The light is no longer a bonfire, but a powerful electric lamp. But the core of the structure, the ramps you designed, the concrete you mixed, the fundamental engineering of it all, it is still yours. You built something that outlasted your own civilization. You built something that became a permanent part of the human story. Your vow was not just fulfilled. It was immortalized in stone. As our journey through the story of the Tower of Hercules concludes tonight, we're reminded that the past is far from dusty and dull. It's a vibrant, often surprising, and always intriguing tapestry, woven with human ingenuity, resilience, and the occasional ancient mystery that still makes us wonder. This is the Sleeping Archaeologist, encouraging you to remain curious about the incredible tales still waiting to be discovered beneath our feet.